Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Cownden Missing Project copyrighted edition for our video channel. And this is a missing persons segment. And we're going to be talking about a few cases that will just blow your mind. One of them about an entire family that disappeared and it's never been solved. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But one of the motives behind me doing these videos, when I first talked about it with Ben, is to keep people alive when they're in the woods. That may seem pretty simple, but everybody has their different style, let's say. A lot of people like to trust immensely. Other people are leery. Other people are very defensive. Others are completely welcoming. So how do you define that line for yourself? Let's just say that you and your family are around a picnic table and somebody you've never seen before walks up out of nowhere and just starts talking to you. Should you be leery? Should you be cautious? One story I'm going to talk to you about tonight, you're going to rethink everything you thought you'd do. But, talked about this a lot in the past. That is people who carry guns. I'm one of those people. I was raised around guns. My dad had guns. He taught me how to use guns. I went on to become a policeman. Went on to a SWAT team. I shot more rounds than probably anybody you know. That's a lot. I feel probably more comfortable with my gun in my hand than I do with a hammer in my hand. And I'm serious. So it's sometimes difficult for me to explain to people, okay, well, the safest thing for you to do is carry a gun when you go in the woods. Well, I always have to remind myself that everybody has a comfort level for different things. And I get that. But on the optimum end of that scale, you need to look out for yourself. And then when you have a family, you need to look out for your family. And I don't care if you're the husband or the wife, you have equal responsibility for your kids. And when you go out into the woods, it's not Disneyland, folks. Even Disneyland has perverts, so. But when you go out into the woods, you need to remember there's wild life out there. It's not tame life. Everyone's scratching for an existence out there. Now, I've written enough about missing people, missing children that have never been found and should have been found, where there was no evidence of animal predation that can never be explained. Hundreds of cases where parents said, yeah, my child was right next to me 1 second, the next second they're gone. And then there's a lot of stories out there where something happened very unusual. So unusual that people can't figure out what happened. My point being is that you, when you go into those woods, you need to be prepared for anything. Just pretend you're on your own. Chances are there's no sheriff around there. There's no search and rescue for days. Yeah, you're on your own. So I did a trailside talk about all of the things you need to carry. It's on my page. But one thing that other officers have said to me, who are my friends, said, Dave, maybe you ought to just nudge the public a little more. And if they have entertained the idea of carrying a gun, let's start that process. I don't want anybody carrying a gun, nobody, until you've been trained with it by a professional. Now, almost every pistol and rifle range has experts there that are more than willing to work with you and train you. Even take a class from the National Rifle Association and then get proficient with it. A lot of people just take a class and that's the end. Nah, that's not the end. It's like with any tool. The more you use that tool under a variety of circumstances, the more valuable that skill with that tool becomes. Well, Dave, how does that apply to carrying a gun? Well, you're not always going to be able to hit everything you aim at when you're pointing from your shoulder, say with a rifle or with a pistol. What may give you the best opportunity to hit it with 1 or 2 rounds? That may be going down to your knees and shooting from your knees. It may be finding something to lean up against to a tree and shoot from there. You have to shoot from all of those different positions, hundreds of rounds, before you can start to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is my plan. And what do I mean by that? We talk about it all the time. Walking down a trail here in Montana, you walk around a turn and 50 feet away there's a grizzly bear looking at you on the middle of the trail. You're not going to outrun him, I guarantee it. So the plan Angie and I have is that she's going to deploy the bear spray. We have one that'll shoot 40 feet. We're going to first make sure that the wind's not blowing back in our face so it doesn't debilitate us. I'm going to pull out my gun and I'm going to say a little prayer and hope that that bear goes the other way. Because if that bear comes charging at me, chances are, if it's really, really mad, it's going to run right through the spray. It's happened so many times. So really my accuracy and my ability goes back to my training. Even under the most stressful conditions, if you train long enough and hard enough, you're going to be okay. It applies to everything in life. Now later on we're going to talk about a case, how all of this greatly applies. But let's get to the letters. And we've got some good ones this week. Start with the first one. Hey Dave, my supernatural experience happened sometime between 2018 and 20 when I was into the painting and hiding of rocks. It's very popular in the US, around the world, and very much so in Oregon, where I live. I would never have thought I was going to have an eerie supernatural experience while looking for and hiding these rocks. This fun hobby started for me in 2018 when I found a painted red heart rock in a local Eugene, Oregon store. When I found it and flipped it over, it read, hashtag LCR Keeper Hide, post to Facebook. I researched Facebook and I joined hashtag LCR Lane County Rocks. I posted my rock find and was hooked. Rock painting enthusiasts hide rocks all over. Local parks are very popular. I never knew that. One park I frequented was popular for hiding and finding, was where my eerie experience happened. I was at the Wallace M. Ruff, RUFF Jr. Memorial Park in Springfield, Oregon. It's between the city of Springfield and the McKenzie River, just east of Eugene. And it's right there between, right on the river. It's normally just called Ruff Park by the locals. It's managed by William A. Lane Parks and Recreation District and is a 10-acre magnolia arboretum. Its history started in the 70s when Wally Ruff, a local high school student, purchased the land to start his own business. Wally grew flowers on the property and sold them off to pay the land. He went on after high school and college to become a landscape contractor. When he was 35 and on vacation in Mexico, he died tragically. His father honored his son's death by donating the land, which now became the Magnolia Arboretum. It is a lovely park when you first walk across a wooden bridge with a creek that flows in winter to a paved path that goes around the entire park. Finding spots to hide painted rocks is easy here. There's so many magnolia trees and kind of trees, shrubs, and various flowers. There are several benches and a few picnic tables. My husband would accompany me there for exercise. He would help me hide the rocks and find other painters' rocks. Many times we would end up separated, not walking together. Not good. Always stay together. One morning after walking the paved path, I went to the other side of the trees where there was a large grassy area where people play frisbee and run with dogs, etc. As I walked along the edge of the grass that borders the trees, I was scanning the trees to my left looking for painted rocks. I was wondering where my husband was. I thought I heard him a short distance away. I stopped suddenly and quickly turned around. I was shocked to see a strange man not far behind me. He was walking, looking at the ground in front of him, and then looking to his left at the trees. It was like he was looking for rocks as well. The weird thing was, he was transparent. Yeah, that would be weird. I stopped and turned so fast that he didn't notice, and I stopped and was looking directly at him. He looked wide-eyed and just as shocked as I was. Well, if he was invisible, how could you tell his facial features? He then quickly darted into the trees as if to hide. I did not see him again. I could tell that this entity was male, even though I didn't see clothing. He did not appear to be naked, but looked like someone would if they were covered in thick mud. Kind of like the Predator did. How Schwarzenegger looked in that movie. Sheer like a shadow man. I was a little freaked out. A little freaked out. And quickly went to find my husband. We left, and I never did feel comfortable visiting Rough Park again. Yeah. I don't know if I'm the only one who ever saw this entity, but most people love going there and aren't spooked in the least. I'd put a post on Facebook if I was you. I still wonder what kind of entity I encountered that day and why was he following me. Could it have been Wally Ruff watching over his land or something else? Thank you, Dave, for the inspiration to get my experience written down and for you all. Well, thanks for sharing. Appreciate it. You know, talked about a lot of things here. A lot of freaky things. But let's not underestimate whatever you saw out there was very freaky. So, I would have been bothered by it. For sure. Next one. Hey Dave, recently you have been discussing orbs on your channel in different colors. Well, I have a red orb encounter from 2006 while duck hunting season near Lubbock, Texas while in college at Texas Tech. Was alone in between Lorenzo and Floyd-Data, Texas, about 15 miles northeast of Lubbock. Flat land, mainly cotton fields, hunting a 5-acre or so bowl where seasonally rainwater collects and replenishes the aquifer. We call this Playa Lakes in West Texas for those not familiar with this type of country. Pretty much from Panhandle to Texas to Canada, Great Plains. Never really thought about this weird occurrence until I had a creature entity Bigfoot encounter on my family's land in deep East Texas piney woods opening day of 16 and 20 rifle season camping. A entity creature stole my deer meat harvested the day before out of my Yeti cooler, no pun intended, and the cooler was latched. This is after 2 bipedal somethings were encircling our camp, and left a tent and slept rest the night in the truck. Never felt the truck move or cooler that was in the bed. Back to the red orb encounter near Lubbock. I'll try to make this short. After throwing decoys and making a small blind out of tumbleweeds, I was sitting waiting for the sun to come up. A little bit of a low-hanging fog, not enough to see the entire bowl of cotton fields. No lights from houses or any other light source, and no moonlight. I was in the middle of nowhere farmland. While sitting in the crappy tumbleweed blind, I noticed a dim red light around 200 yards across the playa field floating about the height of the cotton plants. It floated at a slow pace and was very dim at times. I would say like a dim red star in the sky. Almost had to use preferable vision to see it at times. Watched dim red orb float across the field slowly around 100 yards and disappeared, and the encounter was done. At this time I was a 21-year-old dumb college kid about to graduate. Thought was some weird light reflection off a barn owl's hunting eyes. No way due to the slow speed. Looking back at it now and feeling that came over me. Scared me enough to load my shotgun early and gave me the heebie-jeebies. Good spelling on that. Only other time I've had fear while in the outdoors other than East paranormal creatures. So here's a red dim orb color example for you in the village of the truth seekers. Not that interesting as others, but here's a red one for you. FYI, I have duck hunted hundreds of swamp bottoms, bayous, etc. before and around that date as a kid and never seen anything like it before. P.S. I can feel something is off starting this spring until now, like stated in your last video. Others I have recently also. I believe it's an unseen spiritual war that's about to encompass our world. Just my opinion. I appreciate the orb stories. They're pretty weird. There's hundreds of them out there. Trust me. Next one. After listening to your review of Skinwalker book, I bought it. I was fascinated. Couldn't put it down. Notable was a list of personalities involved. It was a list of who's who in the field of leading edge science, which is why I like the book and their studies. Orbs, Foo Fighters, St. Elmo's Fire, Burning Brush may all be facets of the same thing. In the late 1960s, Jacques Vallée made a presentation at Santa Cruz. Lived there for 8 years. He related that a study of UFO reports was analyzed. Sightings compared to time of day, night versus population density. The conclusion was that there were 200 landings or near landings of UFOs every 24 hours. That makes one wonder if Earth is a seaport, if the cosmos where travelers stop to refuel, drop out unwanted passengers, maybe Shanghai a few humans to replenish the crew or capture zoo specimens. That was a good one. Similar remote viewing results were obtained by Pudov and Targ during their series on technology experiments at Stanford. Also notable is that when they were working with Uri Geller, the results were inconclusive as he failed to perform under controlled conditions. However, during these times, the computer system housed on the floor below was plagued by failures. The computer techs vociferously blamed Geller for the system glitches. After Geller left, systems all returned to normal. The hitchhiker effect is especially troubling. It makes me wary of doing any personal meddling into places, stations where I may pick up some unwanted baggage. Perhaps in the future, any participant should give a DNA sample before and after their involvement. It appears that some folks' DNA was altered during their adventure, and these effects may be infectious. The book heightened my respect for many of the players in this field and introduced me to some new ones, and I recommend it, and your books as well, to anyone who is curious about the paranormal. How many times have we heard a person who had an encounter with a UFO or Sasquatch recount the event and describe it as an epiphany? You mentioned a UFO encounter involving an aircraft near Monterey. For followers who may be interested, you may want to mention the work of Richard Haynes. His carefully researched and presented documentation of contact between a small craft and UFOs as parallels to your work. Often in your work, it comes out that a missing person expired is found in an area thoroughly searched, or a place where it'd be neatly impossible to access. It seems to me that a possible answer for all these people and mutilated cattle have been dropped from above. Thanks. Yeah, dropped from above is a very simple solution to many of these issues. Next story. Hey Dave, I hope you're well and best wishes to you. I've been following you as a subscriber for many years. Thank you for your extreme commitment and dedication. I'm contacting you about a very strange incident that took place many years ago when I lived in southwest Scotland, near the Isle of Arran, A-R-R-A-N. I grew up in this area, though moved away to London in my mid-20s, where I now live with my family. There's something that I really haven't shared with anyone for many decades, and the people who were witness to it were myself and a very good friend who used to go hiking and camping with me all the time. It was a lovely, crisp spring day in '81. We were both about 16, And my friend and I, along with his dog, which I remember was a good-sized crossbreed, set off on a long hike to Muirs Heald County Park. We planned to take a long hike into the park, camp overnight, and return. Photos attached. So, let you guys see what this place looked like. Really not a lot of ground cover, kind of open fields, grass, a little bit of cover up here. Right on the ocean or right on lakes and rivers and water specifically. Nice area. We headed off into the park at about 6 a.m. on the first morning, and by mid-afternoon we were in the middle of the park itself, set up our tent. It had been a wonderful hike. The weather was fine. We found a good and safe location for a camp and settled down for the evening. There was absolutely no one around apart from us. We could see for miles in all directions, and not a soul came into view. Even though Jim and I were only 16, we were quite experienced hikers and campers, and had been walking in this area for many years. Yeah, you really needed one of these missing 411 caps to make the hiking trip perfect, though. However, on this particular trek, even though it sounds strange and that we may have been imagining it, we were very uneasy. Jim's dog, who was always a friendly and good-tempered animal, was unhappy all afternoon and kept growling under his breath from time to time. His ears would prick up and he would bark and look in various directions from the camp into the hills. Stop right there. If you have a dog with you and it's acting like that for a reason. Pay attention. Don't ignore it. Sometimes even his hairs, hackles, as we call them in Scotland, the back of his neck would stand up. As the evening passed into night, both Jim and I did not get much sleep, as we both felt strangely agitated, and the dog would constantly want to run out of the tent and then back inside again. At one point, we got so spooked that we considered packing up and leaving in the early hours while it was still dark. However, we decided to wait till morning, as trekking in that landscape in the dark could be treacherous, as there are many steep ravines and areas where you could fall and break a leg or worse. Though the hours seemed to last forever, that morning came and we made sure we had a good breakfast, packed our kit, and headed out. The walk out of the park would take a number of hours. Some parts of the trail contain undulating areas where you can lose sight of someone for maybe 20 seconds. They're around 50 yards in front or behind you. It's a strange landscape, high moorlands around 2,000 feet, and tough going at times. As we were on our hike, I remember Jim telling me that he was convinced someone was following us, as he thought he saw something in the tree line 500 yards away. I thought I couldn't see anything, but felt in my gut something was around, and the dog was very much running ahead of us and stopping to look back as if saying, "Hurry up and let's get out of here." We picked up the pace and the dog's encouragement and kept walking. The dog was around 30 yards in front of us and disappeared below a dip in the moorline, out of line of sight for about 10 seconds. Absolutely no more. When we reached the same area, the dog was completely and utterly gone. Completely gone. There was logically nowhere for that dog to go. Nowhere for it to fall, no holes, no bogs, no hiding places, no hazards, dangers, nothing. The other point is that it was only out of our sight for less than 10 seconds. And apart from the dip, we could clearly see in all directions and at least a mile. We searched everywhere around this area and found a higher point, but still nothing. We searched for an hour and sat in the same area in disbelief looking at each other. Jim was upset and also worried about what his father would think, as it was the family dog. It was very upsetting, and at that age, we did not have a clue about what to do. That would be very disturbing. Even though this happened 40 years ago, I clearly remember the feeling of fear and anxiety that gripped us both at the time, and we virtually ran the remainder of the journey back home. We literally felt that if we didn't get out of that area quickly, something very bad was going to happen. We had to explain to Jim's father the terrible news. He thought the dog possibly fell down a sinkhole, possibly was attacked by a golden eagle, which you do see from time to time in that area. It just wasn't believed that the dog simply disappeared and we had to move on with our lives, and eventually it was forgotten in the past. I don't know if any of your subscribers have experienced anything similar with your dogs disappearing under strange circumstances. Yeah, read Missing 411 Eastern U.S. There's a whole ton of stories in there about people and their dogs who disappear. One thing I do know is that I have never, ever gone back through the same specific area within the park when I have revisited it in the years. It gives me the creeps. Take care and kindness and regards. So, point of separation. You got separated from your dog. It went into an area where you couldn't see. Same as with people. It's happened many times. Hundreds of times that I've wrote to you about. Wrote to you in books and presented here on YouTube. Do I think that something strange happened? Absolutely. It just doesn't make sense with what you described. Now, think about, we've talked about it before, a portal that is armed with something very intelligent. It waits for that point of separation till it's out of sight, activates something, and the dog is gone. Very disturbing. I'm kind of surprised that the dad didn't want to go back to the spot and look for the dog. That's what I would have done. I would have spent days looking for Hawk. Wouldn't have given up. Good afternoon, sir. My apologies for the delayed response. My sighting occurred in July 2012 at approximately 0300 at the Sun Valley Parkway near where Daniel Robinson disappeared outside of Phoenix. A family friend, Thad Kramer, was driving to work on the Palo Verde nuclear power plant with a carpool partner when they observed an animal in the headlights. Upon slowing his vehicle and viewing the creature at close range, they saw what looked like an orangutan with orange-reddish hair covering the body. It was seated on the dirt shoulder of their lane with its back to them. As their vehicle approached, it pivoted on its buttocks, threw out its right arm to the ground, rose to two legs, and ran west into the desert and out of the headlights. Thad estimated the height of the creature at 5 feet. When Thad and his co-worker arrived at the plant, they told company workers about the strange orangutan-type creature. Surprisingly, several other employees had similar encounters with something matching the description. They never saw the front of the creature, only its back and side profile that ran away. I didn't get permission to share Thad's contacts info, but if you'd like, I can get it. Send it to me. Can-Am Missing, like Canadian American. Can-Am Missing at yahoo.com. My encounter with blue orbs occurred on 2014 while working graveyard as a patrol officer in the Gila River Police Department, still employed there. I was speaking with a security officer at Bapchula, Arizona, in the parking lot of the District 5 Service Center. Sometime after swing shift went home at 1 a.m., we both noticed two balls of light stationary in the AJI mountain located on the north bank of the river. Interstate 10 is at its base at milepost 175. The orbs appear to be the size of basketballs and were blue in color. One orb was closer to the peak and the other appeared to be 20 feet lower. I proceeded north on St. Peter's Road in my patrol vehicle until the road dead ends at the river for a closer look, but they disappeared before I arrived. Local tradition says that the orange orbs are spirits, but I haven't heard anything about the blue orbs, other than other people have seen them around the mountains there. Side note, I was speaking to one of the tribe's medicine men recently who told me people have seen UFOs fly into the Estrella mountain range in the res. Not sure if it's related, but I figured it's worth noting. It is. Couple of things. First of all, he's a police officer. Congratulations that he's smart enough, because a lot of them aren't, to talk to the people on the reservation, especially the elders. Learn a lot what's going on in the area if you just engage them and we're polite and are interested. And if you're a police officer out there and you have some issue with Native Americans, you can't generalize. There's good people in every group. And I can honestly tell you that the vast, vast majority of Native Americans I've ever been with are just outstanding people. Just me. All right. Next story. Hey Dave, been following you for several years now, and I had to write after watching an episode of the show Ancient Aliens. I've been on that show a few times. You're probably well aware of the theory, but it seems to be very applicable to the phenomena you have documented of apparently targeted victims. The theory is quite simple, that huge quantities of data can be stored when combined or merged inside organic matter, and its DNA. The show quotes that entire output of Wikipedia could be stored in a single drop of DNA, and physicists are now studying human DNA for any potential messages in the strands. Why I thought of Missing 411 was how you recount cases where similarly named people have been abducted, and how it seems great lengths are taken to ensure the target is abductable. But more so, how you point out how people with high intelligence and also disabled people are taken. Very true. Could it be that this extra artificial additive in a person's makeup has caused the person's brain to be positively or negatively affected, causing the above average IQ or the psychologically anomalous behavior? Regardless, this data must be valuable because whatever is causing the 411 is compelled to visit our species and retrieve it. It could be as simple as maybe their DNA is so interbred that they need new stuff to reinvigorate their society. Who knows? This may also explain why certain parts of a cow's biology are collected in your ongoing cattle mutilation cases. Perhaps some data is somewhat like a password, and doesn't require the complexity of storing it in human DNA. Simply store it in the beast that we ourselves treat dismissively as biological collateral. The question this raises then is, who would wish to store data this way and why? In my personal opinion, I look to our convenient neighbor, Mars, which was exactly like Earth, conducive to human life billions of years prior to our own cultivation. Perhaps this Martian proto-civilization either destroyed themselves or transcended their selves, so seeing Earth's potential or causing it, identified a way to store information within us that was vital to the preservation and continuation of their civilization. There may well be more details in your cases that may contradict this theory, but then don't we agree that there could be other entities carrying out different acts for different purposes with a different MO? Of course. But again, taking the theory further, might the retrieval of this data by whatever means could cause the vessel, that means the missing, to die by otherwise unearthly causes, or marginally to return to our dimension with no memory? Perhaps children are more resilient to the process, or the abduction entity cannot wait for maturation to adulthood. I've used this example before, but let's do it again. Star Trek. And they walk into the room, and they're all going to be transported from this room on the Star Trek, on the Enterprise, to a planet. And they turn it on, and all of a sudden you see the human dematerialize and then materialize on another planet. What if it's something like that? And on the show, they've talked about, you know what, the person was just lost in space. We couldn't get them to materialize somewhere else. Or they materialized somewhere else and they didn't do well in the transport and they did die, like this person's saying. I think it is accepted as part of the nuclear fusion premise that the energy contained in the biological atom is unlimited and unequaled by any artificial means. It makes sense, then, that a living organic organism would be the best vessel for this power. No production costs, we self-replicate ourselves, and therefore we have infinite shelf life. Forgive me if I appear to ramble. I'm no physicist and have no skill at expressing these ideas, but I hope I got the general idea across. Many thanks for your dedication to this and other causes. I wish I had half of Mr. Paulides' energy and drive. I, for one, envy the commitment you've put into chasing on your interests, but I also take inspiration from it. Well, I'm humbled that anybody takes interest in what we do. And you say, well, Dave, why do you say that? Well, first of all, I get approached a lot when I'm out in the public. And you know what? Everyone I've met out in that public has been so nice. And I mean that. Maybe I'm just super lucky that the people out there that follow me are decent people. I don't know. But I also hear from Joe Hauser at the Montana Vortex that people that are watching this stop in and talk to him and want to see the different things that he's caught in the vortex on his closed circuit TV, and he has to see his phone, and he shows you what he's captured. And Joe and I always see each other at least once a week, maybe twice a week, have lunch, have dinner. And we always talk about this. He goes, no, Dave, people are always so nice, friendly, interesting, and engaged. And some people in this world are not interested in these kind of things. Don't want to be engaged, don't want to put the mind through what may be going on in our world that is really different. And I get that. But, yeah, thanks for your interest, and thanks for coming up and saying hello. I appreciate it. So, the first case I'm going to talk to you about today, first missing person case, I've talked about this mountain probably a dozen times now. Mount Rainier in Washington. There's a large cluster of missing people on that mountain. Large. Don't often talk about military men that disappear, but Lieutenant Commander retired Milt Armstrong, 54 years old, went missing September 14th, 1968 on Mount Rainier. Now, he was from an area called Valley Center, California. Retired from the Navy. Made a drive from Washington, or from California up to Washington. Told some relatives in Blaine, Washington, that he was going to be climbing Rainier. Didn't say summiting, said climbing. And that he would be out no later than the 14th of September. This is smart. This is what you've got to do when you go into the woods. You tell someone when you're going to be out. Milton did that. And you got to tell people that you trust implicitly. And when I'm out, we're all good. But if I don't come out, don't wait 2 days. If I'm not out, there's a reason. You call search and rescue. His relatives did the right thing. They called the National Park Service. So, if you've never been to Mount Rainier, I encourage you to go. It's really a beautiful park. Now, there's a location down here called Paradise. I don't call it a city. It's more like a big national park building, and there's trails and things that run off of Paradise. And there is a trail that goes from Paradise at 5,500 feet up to Camp Muir, which is just about at 10,000 feet. Now, when the relatives called in that he was missing, National Park Service went to Paradise, right here, and they found his brown Chevy carryall with California plates parked in the parking lot. Now, he told his relatives he was going to be climbing and he would probably be going up to Camp Muir. Now, that is no wimpy hike, especially for somebody who's 54. Starts at about 5,500, ends at 10,000, and it is pretty much straight up there. And it should take you about 5 hours, 5.5 hours. It's all uphill. Well, the National Park Service found the vehicle, and they put 6 of their best climbing rangers in a team, and they left 2 days later at 12:30 to get to Camp Muir. So as they're going up, there's a lot of people on this trail. It's pretty busy, especially September would have been busy. So they get up to Camp Muir later that day. And when you get there, there's a lot of rock stone buildings. It's like 2 of them, big ones. And there's a flat area where a lot of campers pop a tent up, spend the night. There's a bathroom. That's about it. And in one of these covered locations, they found Milton's backpack. And there was a note on it saying, September 12th, 3 p.m., I'll be back to get this. Meaning he would be back September 12th at 3 p.m. So it was now the 16th. They called for more reinforcements. And that afternoon it started snowing. It snowed hard. And they stayed up there and they searched for 4 days. By the 16th, 3 feet of snow had fallen. There was fog, there was wind. There was a plane flying overhead. A helicopter was brought in. On the 17th of September, they had 60-mile-an-hour winds. And if anybody's ever been in 60-mile-an-hour winds around snow, it can be like a whiteout. You hardly see anything. It was ridiculous. They were trapped there for a few days because they couldn't get down. It was too dangerous. By the 18th, though, it had cleared and 20 men came in for the search and rescue. The helicopter went back into the sky. On September 20th, the search and rescue was terminated for bad weather, and they got the Rangers off the mountain for their own safety. Now, they went back, and on September 12th, there were other Rangers in the area of Muir Camp that remembered seeing Milton earlier that day. They said he was moving well, no issues, there was no conversation, but they remember the backpack, they remember seeing him. He went somewhere, when he reached Muir Camp, he went somewhere for a planned 2-hour hike max, because he reached that hut by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He said he'd be back by 3 o'clock, 2 hours. So if you get out a map and you put how far could somebody hike in 1 hour at 10,000 feet at his age? Not that far. And that's where the search zone was. They found nothing. They went in and out for 4 days. But the real troubling thing to me is I did an online search. I can't see where he was ever found. Now, the way the National Park Service is with these type of disappearances, it's not surprising it was never said. Now, there's a possibility his remains were found, and back in 1968, they didn't have DNA, so they didn't really have a way to capture it. And the real question is whether the National Park Service went back to the relatives of Milton's and got their DNA so they could do a DNA match if any bones were found in that area around Camp Muir. Since 1968, thousands of people have gone through that camp. Thousands. How could Milton not have been found? Yeah. Very strange case. But it's one of those cases where it matches others on Mount Rainier. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times these people have disappeared not in areas where they're on a technical climb with ropes and pitons and carabiners, because that's not what Milton was doing. But they were just hiking in an area where hundreds of people would be hiking on a regular day, and boom, they're gone. So, as I've told many people before, try not to do this alone. And if you do alone, there's personal locator beacons you can carry if you get into trouble. But there's also beacons where you can pay for a monthly fee, and it sends out a location notification to your friends that want to follow you while you're on the hike, and they could see where you're traveling on the mountain at any one time. It usually goes out like once every 2 to 6 minutes. Those are available too. And if, let's say, Angie was going to go out, she was the type of person that went out and hiked alone, I'd get her one of those, but she doesn't do that. We go out together and do all these things. But they're very, very good device to have. If Milton had one, he probably would have been found by now. So, next story. Douglas Pascoe, missing November 29th, 1922, at about 3 p.m. from Clinton, Arizona. He was with 2 other hunters, Sidney Bowles in Austin, Urea. They left Clinton, they crossed the Gila River, and during that day, November 29th, Douglas got separated from the other two guys. They all agreed that they'd be back at their vehicles by 3 p.m. At 4 p.m., Douglas didn't come back. So his buddies started two large fires, fired multiple shots in the sky, and at about that time, heavy rain and sleet was falling in the area. Well, the guys contacted the local sheriffs, and by the next day, canines from Tucson had come in, along with a 60-man posse. Two different canines tracked Douglas from where he was last seen with his friends, a half mile, and then lost. Both lost in the same area. Well, that's pretty odd, Dave. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty odd, especially when you're in the middle of nowhere. Now, in many of these investigations, the sheriff gets told by people in the community, oh, I saw him. He was at the store the other day while he was supposed to be missing. I hear this all the time. And you know what? 99 times out of 100, it doesn't even stop. It goes in here and out here. But they kept the search and rescue going. There was a 7-day search and rescue. So, let me explain where this is here. So this is Phoenix area, over in this area, Gilbert, Arizona, Mesa. This is Globe, Fort Thomas, Stafford, and then Clinton, or Clifton. And then Clifton, right here, is the Greenlee County Historical Area, and they were hunting in the area just east of there, very near the state line with New Mexico. Well, that 7-day search and rescue was eventually called off. There's a cluster of disappearances in this area. Lots of big boulders. So let's fast forward 2 years. August 4th, 1924. Douglas had been gone about 20 months. Everyone said he was a very experienced outdoorsman, in great shape, a very good hunter, and somebody that could be trusted. Well, on August 4th, some rock hunters found his body a half a mile from where the canines both lost his track and his scent. He was on a hillside, his rifle was slightly uphill, and he was identified by guns, the gun he had, the rifle, and the keys he had in his pocket. It was in an area that had been previously searched. The coroner couldn't determine the cause of death because of the seriousness of the deterioration of the body. There was no gunshots in the victim. It was a complete whodunit. In a cluster zone, weather played a role. Around boulders, subset hunters previously searched. Pretty standard equation for the cases I talk about. Douglas Pascoe. How many times does this same replication of facts happen? Now, if you're new to watching, I am not pointing a negative finger at search and rescue. No way. Canines, 2 of them lose the scent in the same area. How's that possible? Something, as I have stated over the years, something unusual is happening to these people. Now, I'm going to tell you a case. First time I read it years ago, bothered the heck out of me. And I gotta say, it changed the way I looked at myself in the outdoors. I've always been someone who's been careful, but I'm probably way more careful today. story happened Labor Day weekend, September 1st, 1974, in Carberry Creek, Oregon. I'm telling you, this place is in the middle of nowhere. And right near the California border. I'll show you in a minute. It involved 4 individuals. Richard Cowden, who was 28, Belinda Cowden, 22, David Cowden, 5, and Melissa Cowden, 5 months. Now, Richard was employed by Steve Wilson Logging, and they lived in White City, Oregon, about an hour and a half from where they were camping. And they were camping along a place on Carberry Creek. They've camped there many times before. One of the reasons they camped there was Belinda's mom lived not too far from there. It was a good creek for fishing. There was a reservoir not too far away. There was a general store for the community. So they arrived there on August 30th with their basset hound named Droopy. True story. Now, before we get too far into it, it's a picture of Richard and his wife. It's a picture of Belinda and Melissa not too far before they disappeared. And this is the Oregon-California border right here. This is Applegate Lake. This is Carberry Creek right through here, which is where they were camped, right on the creek. This area is remote, folks. I've been in that area. It's just maybe a couple hours east of Hoopa, where I spent 2 years. I've been all through this area dozens and dozens of times. It is remote. But I'm sure the Cowdens felt very comfortable. They'd been there many times. Their mom was in the area. Well, on September 1st, Richard and David, the 5-year-old, they get up, and at 9 a.m. they go get milk at the Copper General Store. And it's real close to where they were camping. And in fact, they walked over there on foot to get some milk, and then walked back to their campsite along the creek. Oh, Huck just arrived. Huck just left. So they were supposed to be at Belinda's mom's house that night, September 1st, for dinner. Well, that night, later, they hadn't shown up at the mom's house. And so Belinda's mom goes to the campsite because she had been there the last couple of days and checks on the family. And what she sees is something out of a dark horror movie. She finds the picnic table set like everyone was sitting down to have breakfast. Just down the hill towards the creek, Richard's wallet is sitting on the ground, wide open, money in it. Their vehicle is parked there, unlocked. She has a bad feeling. She calls the sheriff. Before the sheriff even arrives, he calls the state police. No, September 2nd, that next morning at 1:30 in the morning, Droopy shows up at the general store where Richard and David had been the day before. So they get the dog, they get him back to camp, turn it over to the mom. There's a 7-day massive search and rescue in that area. They searched out 15 miles. They had air support, ground, canines, everything you can imagine. The FBI showed interest and said that they would assist, but they wouldn't be actively involved. Just assist logistically with technical things and such. They said that you have to show that they were kidnapped or crossed state lines before they would get involved. Well, the sheriff said he had a gut feeling that something really bad happened. but they didn't know what. It wasn't reasonable that this family would walk out of the middle of the wilderness like this, especially with their mom just a mile away. Now this happened on September 1st, 1974. Richard was the oldest of three brothers. His next older brother died of cancer, and his younger brother was still alive. Now, fast forward 2 months. Richard's father, Lester, killed himself with a shotgun blast on December 18th. The family stated that he was so depressed and so lost without his son, couldn't live. How horrible. How horrible. April 12th, 1975. About 7 months after the family disappears, two prospectors are 6.5 miles from their campsite, and they're on a hillside, a 65% incline, very steep hill, an area that had been searched. And they get up to a small hole in the ground that had rocks and things in it, in front of it. They started moving the rocks aside, and they found 3 bodies inside. Belinda, David, and Melissa. All gunshot wounds to the head. And you say, "Oh, Dave, this isn't a missing 411 case." No. This is a learning case. Pay attention. Prospectors know something really bad happened. They get the sheriff. The sheriff comes back in there. And 200 yards from where they found 3 members of the family, they find Richard in a sitting position, tied to a tree, dead. Obviously, his body badly decomposed. The coroner stated at the time they couldn't determine Richard's cause of death. They thought it might have been a gunshot, but there was no wounds or fragments to the skeleton. There were major questions about this case. How could they get the woman up this really steep hill from the roadway? They surmised that the suspect had to have known this area intimately to know that there was this little hole where they could dump these bodies. But then they didn't understand why they would leave Richard out. And the only thing I could surmise from that is that Richard was a bigger man, and whoever killed him didn't have the strength to pull him up and put him in the hole. And then the motive. It's a great question. It wasn't robbery. Richard's wallet was laying on the ground. Belinda's purse was in the truck. None of it was rummaged through. Nothing was missing. Over the course of the years, the Oregon State Police had many suspects. And they never arrested anyone for this crime. But the number of suspects that they had in such close proximity to this crime scene was a wake-up call for me. It really was. When I go into the wilderness, I like to enjoy the beauty, solitude, animals. I don't like to be thinking that there's bad guys around every tree. But that's a reality sometimes, folks. What killed this family? 1 person? 4 people? When you think about this, it's 4 people. There was no evidence that anyone was shot anywhere near the area of that picnic table where they were camping. None. Which means that they had to load 4 people into a vehicle and get them out of the area. Now, one of the suspects had a van. That would have been good. But then what do? You have Richard drive and you sit in the back seat if you're the bad guy with your gun? How do you get everyone to cooperate to leave that scene? And then why even get them to leave? I don't get it. I don't understand it. But that goes to show how many Looney Tune people are out there. Now, there was a lot of circumstantial evidence in this case that it might have been one of two people, and one person was named as a suspect at one point but was never arrested. I think it's a very unusual case, really unusual. This is why I said, if you're in a family, a husband and wife, both learn to carry a gun. And carry it. Don't keep it in the car. You're in the woods, carry it. Now, the other part is that the victims in this case were all very vulnerable. They were surmising that it was sometime around September 1st at noon that the family was taken. And all the evidence showed that they were probably all in their bathing suits. Hard to carry a gun in your bathing suit, especially when you're going in the water. Yeah. Richard and Belinda Cowden, Carberry Creek, Oregon. Still an open case. Now, why did I tell you this? Because my job is to keep you alive when you're in the woods. I need you to be on your toes. I need you to be thinking carefully when people approach you. I think I've told you before that I was way up in Northern California and I was in a state park. And somebody told me to go there because there had been a lot of Bigfoot sightings in there. And I got there and I could see why. I was way back in this park. Probably hiked like 6 hours to get there. And then as I'm going up this trail, this absolute garbage-looking human walks up to me and goes, "What are you doing here?" He's carrying a rifle. I go, "Just hiking." He goes, "You need to turn around." I said, "I do?" I was carrying my gun. And the way he was carrying the rifle, if he was going to turn it on me, he was dead. I said, "Why?" And he's, "Am I outside the park? Am I on private property?" "No, you need to turn around." I said, "Okay, no problem. I'm turning around." And I backed my way out of there, found a state park ranger and told him, and he goes, "That's very unusual. We just got a report about somebody else doing that back there yesterday." He goes, "He was carrying a gun." I go, "Yeah, did he point it at you?" "No, but he held it in a threatening manner." He said, "I'm going to get some people to follow up on this." My guess was that there was a marijuana grow back there and they just didn't want me near it. Fine, but got to be careful in the woods. You have to be very careful in the woods. And with more and more people that are homeless, mental health's an issue. Drugs and alcohol are an issue. Yeah. Feel very sorry for Belinda's mom. Living so close and losing so much. Can't even imagine it. But those are our 3 cases for today, folks. Appreciate you being here. Please post these on your social media. If you like it, give me a thumbs up. And watch these as many as you can. It helps me. Watch it 2 or 3 times. It helps me even more. And village is important. We have to stick together, help each other. If you have, I've said this 100 times, but if you have an unusual story that's happened to you in the woods, send it to me. Can-Am missing, Can-Am like Canadian American missing at yahoo.com. I want to hear about it. Strange pictures, I want to see them. But love your family. And lastly, you go out in public, do something nice for someone. I don't care what it is, where you're at, you can do it. It'll hit you right there in the heart that you did something nice. Paulides out.